Why did the gunfire stop so suddenly? The morning air at Fort was usually alive with the steady rhythm of shots echoing across the ranges, a cadence as familiar to the men as their own heartbeat. But now, silence. Every head turned toward the edge of the firing line, where the impossible had just walked into their world. A child. Her steps were small, but her posture carried the weight of something older, heavier. A 12-year-old girl, hair tied back in a neat ponytail, jeans tucked into scuffed sneakers. She shouldn't have been there, not on the sacred ground of America's elite. Yet she walked straight through the crowd of hardened soldiers, past the steel-eyed instructors, and stopped directly in front of Colonel William. The colonel's smirk said everything. He was a man who had seen wars, buried brothers, and ruled these ranges like a feudal lord. But what he saw now looked like an intrusion, a joke, a trespass. His first words cut like barbed wire. "Where's this little girl's mother?" The laughter that followed was nervous, not joyful. No one wanted to laugh at her, but no one dared cross either. The colonel, with his broad shoulders and iron-lined jaw, was not a man accustomed to being challenged, least of all by a child. But the girl didn't flinch. She held her ground, clutching a framed photograph in one hand and a battered journal in the other. Her chin tilted upward, eyes fixed on with a calmness that didn't belong to childhood. When she spoke, her voice was clear, steady, and so matter-of-fact it silenced even the laughter. "Colonel, sir, my name is Emma. I've come to request permission to use the firing range today." The air shifted. Soldiers glanced at one another, eyebrows rising as though waiting for the punchline. But none came. The colonel barked a laugh anyway, the sound harsh in the morning mist. "You think this is a playground?" His voice thundered across the range. "This is a restricted military facility. How in God's name did you even get past the gate?" Emma didn't lower her eyes. She lifted the frame instead, holding it for him to see. A Medal of Honor gleamed beneath the glass, its ribbon frayed from years of careful keeping. Beside it rested a faded green beret, and in the photo beneath, a man in combat gear whose face mirrored hers so clearly that recognition rippled through the watching crowd. "My father," Emma said softly, "Lieutenant James." The name fell like a stone into still water. A wave of silence spread. Older soldiers shifted, their hardened eyes softening with memory. Younger recruits looked confused, sensing the shift but not knowing why. And Colonel, his smirk vanished. For a moment his composure cracked, just enough to reveal recognition. And something else. He knew that name. He had served with that man. James, the sniper whispered about in mess halls, whose shots had saved Marines pinned in. The soldier awarded a Medal of Honor in Syria, posthumously, after holding off waves of fighters to buy time for his team. A name spoken with reverence, carried like a legend through Special Forces ranks. And here stood his daughter, small, steady, and defiant. The colonel tried to recover, his voice losing just a shade of authority. "I knew your father," he said carefully. "He was under my command, but this is no place for a child." Emma didn't move. "3 years ago today he was killed in Syria. I came to honor him, and I have permission." She opened the journal, sliding out an official document signed and stamped by Family Affairs. The colonel snatched it, scanning, irritation growing with each line. It was valid. It bore signatures. It even carried a personal note from Captain requesting special consideration. Murmurs stirred again. Soldiers shifted uneasily. A Medal of Honor recipient's daughter had come with official approval, and their commander was laughing in her face. Colonel narrowed his eyes. "Your father had no business teaching a child to shoot military weapons." But Emma's voice did not waver. "He taught me more than weapons. He taught me why. He said a rifle isn't for killing, it's for protecting. One shot, one life." That phrase struck something deep in the older men. Some lowered their eyes, remembering, because James had lived by those words. Turned sharply, his voice cold again, as if trying to reassert his dominance. If you believe you belong here, then prove it. He ordered a target set at 500 meters, qualification distance, a range meant to test seasoned operators. For a girl half the size of the rifle, it was absurd. And yet, Emma accepted without hesitation. The men muttered among themselves. Some smirked, expecting a humiliation. Others, the ones who had known her father, fell into uneasy silence, because deep down they suspected this child might not be ordinary. Emma walked to the rifle rack. Her small hands hovered over the weapons before settling on an M24, the same model her father had carried in Iraq. She lifted it with practiced ease as though her muscles remembered, laying out her gear, checking the barrel, adjusting the bipod, every movement precise. Too precise for a novice. Hovered, his words sharp, meant to rattle her. That rifle kicks like a mule. Maybe start with something smaller. But Emma ignored him. When she settled into position, something shifted in the air. Her body aligned perfectly with the rifle. Her breathing slowed. She found the scope, adjusted, and let the silence around her dissolve into focus. Her father had once told her, "The perfect shot lives in the space between your heartbeats." She found that space. The rifle barked. The recoil shoved against her small frame, but she absorbed it, already chambering the next round. Another shot. Then another. 10 in total, each one delivered with the same deliberate calm. When she set the rifle down, silence fell like a shroud. Sergeant Miller lowered his spotting scope, his face unreadable. 10 for 10, all center mass. Gasps, a ripple of disbelief. And then a voice, an older veteran, one of the old guard who had quietly gathered to watch. "That's grouping than I've seen from half your qualified snipers." His jaw clenched, his composure fractured, anger bleeding through. This proves nothing. Anyone can get lucky once. But then from the tree line another voice emerged. Gravelly, measured, familiar to those who had served long. Master Sergeant Frank Martinez. At 70, he still stood ramrod straight, eyes sharp as steel. He stepped into the open, his presence alone enough to silence the crowd further. "That wasn't luck," he said, his gaze locked on. "That was skill. The same skill her father had. The skill you've spent 20 years trying to erase." The accusation hung heavy in the autumn air. Soldiers shifted uneasily. His face darkened, but his silence betrayed something deeper than anger. Something like fear. Emma stood, clutching her father's journal, her young face solemn. She had just shattered every expectation, but she wasn't finished. She looked at with steady eyes. "You wanted proof I belonged here. You've got it, but that's not all I brought." She lifted the journal higher, its pages filled with her father's meticulous notes, records of missions, dates, times, transmissions. Evidence. "My father wrote everything down," she said, "including the day he called for air support in Syria, the day you delayed it." The range froze. The accusation was a shot louder than any rifle. For the first time that morning, Colonel had no words. And for Emma, this was only the beginning. How much truth can a child carry in her hands before the weight breaks her? Emma's fingers traced the rough leather of her father's journal as if it were armor. Around her, the firing range still buzzed with unease. Soldiers who had come expecting laughter or spectacle were now silent, their respect shifting toward the girl who had outshot them all. Yet Emma wasn't looking for their respect. She was searching for something more dangerous, answers. And she knew the man standing before her had them. Colonel's face was stone. His silver hair caught the sun, his uniform pressed so sharply it seemed to cut the air itself. But his jaw was tight, his eyes hard. He saw not a child now, but a threat. "You think that book means anything?" His voice was measured, calm on the surface, but there was a tremor beneath, a crack only those who had spent years reading men under fire could hear. "It's a diary, scribbles, nothing more." But Master Sergeant Frank Martinez stepped forward, his voice low, steady, dangerous. "It's a record, and I know what's inside because I was there. Syria, I saw the things you buried. The younger soldiers shifted, unsettled. Words like in Syria weren't just battles, they were graveyards of memory, places where reputations were forged or destroyed. Turned on Martinez, fury flashing in his eyes. "You're out of line, Frank." Martinez didn't move. "Maybe, but so were you when you rewrote history 20 years ago." The silence deepened, heavy, brittle. Soldiers leaned in without meaning to, drawn toward the weight of the moment, toward the story that had been whispered but never spoken. Emma clutched the journal. She didn't know all the details, not yet. But she knew one thing. Her father had kept records because he had suspected this day might come. And so the memory uncoiled, dragging the men back through time. 2004. The city was a furnace of dust and fire, where narrow alleys choked with smoke and bodies. Marines were pinned down, trapped beneath relentless gunfire, radio calls for help bleeding desperation. But the orders from command were clear: hold position. From a crumbling apartment high above, Lieutenant James watched through his scope. His spotter, Martinez, cursed under his breath. "Command says negative. Captain wants us to wait." Didn't answer at first. He tracked the chaos below, Marines dragging the wounded behind a ruined Humvee, AK fire shredding the street around them. 8 insurgents, rifles raised, RPGs slung, closing in like wolves. "They've got 10 minutes, whispered. "Maybe less, and no one's coming." Martinez turned to him. "Orders are orders, Jim." But's eyes never left the scope. His voice was calm, stripped of hesitation. "Some orders shouldn't be followed." The first shot cracked, sharp as lightning. One insurgent dropped, then another. 8 rounds in less than 2 minutes, each one perfect, each one life-saving. The Marines scrambled to safety, their wounded dragged into the shadows. When Martinez returned to base, was waiting, fury twisting his face. "You disobeyed a direct order, spat. "I told you to hold." "With respect, sir," answered evenly. "Those Marines would be dead if we hadn't acted." His voice rose, anger echoing off the walls. "This isn't about those Marines. It's about the chain of command." What didn't know, what none of them knew, was that had already begun reshaping the truth. His report told a different story. He claimed he had given the order to engage. He claimed he had saved the Marines through decisive leadership. The higher-ups believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was the respected captain, was just a lieutenant. The truth was buried under medals and paperwork. Got a silver star, got a reprimand. And yet never fought it, never wrote letters, never demanded hearings. Martinez begged him to, but's answer had been simple. The mission succeeded. The Marines went home. That's what matters. He carried that silence with him for years, but he wrote everything down: dates, times, radio logs. His journal became his quiet rebellion, the truth preserved in ink, even if he never spoke it aloud. Back at the firing range in Fort, Emma lifted that same journal. The weight of it was too heavy for her young hands, yet she held it high. "My father wrote about," she said. "He wrote about you, Colonel. He wrote about Syria too." His mask cracked, just for a heartbeat, enough for the men around him to see, enough for Martinez to step closer, his voice turning into steel. "You left him to die," Martinez said. 3 years ago, when he called for air support, you delayed 37 minutes. You knew exactly who was on that transmission. You knew it was Jim." The colonel's fists clenched at his sides. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin, brittle. "You're accusing me of what? Murder, dereliction of duty. You have no idea what command decisions look like." But the younger soldiers were starring now. Their eyes darted between and the girl, between the colonel's fury and Emma's calm, between power and truth. Emma lowered the journal slowly. Her voice was quiet but carried. "I made a promise at my father's grave that I would restore his honor, and I will." Her words weren't shouted, but they struck harder than any accusation. They carried the kind of conviction that didn't need volume, it needed only truth. Later that evening, The sun sank over Arlington Cemetery, staining the horizon with gold. Emma knelt beside her father's grave, a spent shell casing resting on the stone. The first bullet she had fired that morning. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. 10 for 10, just like you taught me." Her fingers brushed the engraved letters, James, Medal of Honor. "He was there," she continued softly. "He tried to stop me, but Martinez stood by me, and now they all know. They know I'm your daughter, they know what I can do." Her breath caught a mix of pride and sorrow. "I showed them the journal too. He knows I have it, he's afraid he should be." The cemetery was still, the oak leaves whispering above her. It almost felt like her father was listening, the silence around her holding her words. "I'm going to break your record," she promised. "The official one, and then the real one. No one will erase you again." Her small frame rose, silhouetted against the fatting sky. She walked between rows of white stones, carrying her father's legacy like a banner no one could take away. But behind her, shadows moved. Men whispered, because what had started as a child honoring her father had become something far larger, a battle not fought with bullets but with truth. And watching from a distance, knew she had just fired the first shot. 3 weeks later, whispers spread through Fort like wildfire. The girl, the 12-year-old who outshot qualified snipers. Soldiers told the story at mess halls, in barracks, in gyms. Some laughed, brushing it off as myth. Others leaned closer, speaking in hushed voices. But the story wouldn't die. And now a new challenge awaited. The Special Forces Advanced Marksmanship Facility, a place where even elite operators failed more often than they passed. Variable winds, moving targets, shifting conditions. It was a crucible designed to break the best. No civilian had ever been allowed inside, until now. Emma stood before its gates, Martinez at her side. The old guard veterans shadowed them, men who had fought in wars most of the young soldiers barely remembered. Their presence was quiet but deliberate. They had come to witness, to protect, to ensure the truth couldn't be buried this time. "Remember," Martinez said quietly, his voice low enough only she could hear. "Agreed under pressure. He wants you to fail. He'll make it as hard as possible." Emma's gaze didn't waver. "Dad used to say, prepare for the worst conditions you can imagine, then add rain." Martinez smiled faintly. "Smart man, your father." Inside, the facility stretched vast and complex. Targets hidden among artificial hills. Wind machines disguised as terrain. Environmental conditions shifting without warning. And at the center of it all, waiting like a spider in his web, was Colonel. Beside him stood operators from Delta, from the SEALs, men hardened by years of combat. Their expressions ranged from skepticism to curiosity. They weren't here to see a child succeed. They were here to see if the impossible rumors were true. And his eyes never left Emma, cold, calculating, waiting for her to break. But Emma only lifted her father's journal to her chest for a brief moment, a silent ritual, a reminder. Then she set it aside, stepped forward, and took the rifle in her hands. Her father's ghost at her shoulder. Her promise burning in her chest. And the truth still buried, waiting to be pulled into the light. Why did the rifle feel wrong the moment she touched it? The M24 rested on the rack, its matte black steel catching the artificial lights of the facility. It looked standard issue, exactly the kind her father had carried. But the weight shifted oddly in her hands, the balance just slightly off. The bolt caught when she cycled it. The trigger pull dragged heavier than it should. Subtle changes, the kind designed not to be noticed, the kind designed to make her fail. Emma ran her fingers along the stock, calm and methodical, though her chest tightened. She knew was watching her every move, waiting for hesitation, waiting for weakness. His voice carried across the facility, smooth and poisonous. "Is there a problem, miss?" She didn't look up. She tested the bolt again, steadying her hands, hiding the flicker of unease that rose in her chest. "No, sir, it's fine." Fine but not fair. From the corner, Martinez's eyes locked with hers. A silent exchange. He knew, she knew. They had prepared for this. For weeks she had trained with rifles deliberately altered, sticky bolts, heavy triggers, unbalanced weight. Martinez had said it plain, if can sabotage it, he will. Now he had. And Emma was ready. The facility around her hummed with tension. The advanced marksmanship course was no ordinary range. It was a crucible designed to break even veterans, variable winds generated by hidden fans, targets that appeared for seconds before vanishing, distances stretching to 800 meters. Delta operators leaned against the wall, arms crossed, skeptical eyes fixed on the small girl stepping into their world. Navy SEALs muttered wagers under their breath. $50 says she misses more than she hits. Their whispers didn't matter. Emma shut them out, drawing inward to the rhythm her father had drilled into her since she was 6. Breathing steady, cheek welled, consistent, eye relief perfect. Sergeant Miller, though, stood at her side. His face betrayed nothing, but his voice was measured with a touch of respect. 5 shots at 500 meters, then 5 more at 800. Variable winds. Targets appear for 7 seconds. Shooter ready. Emma nodded. Ready, Sergeant. The red light above the range flashed. Her world narrowed to the scope. The first target appeared 500 meters out, a silhouette no bigger than her thumbnail. The artificial crosswind tugged at the grass. Her finger took up the first pressure on the trigger, compensating for the heavier pull. Smooth. Predictable. She exhaled, found the space between heartbeats, and fired. The target rocked, a clean hit. Before the sound faded, she cycled the bolt, overcoming the engineered resistance. Second target, another shot, another hit. Third, fourth, fifth. 5 out of 5. The murmurs behind her grew louder. The SEAL who had placed the wager fell silent. One of the Delta men leaned forward, his skepticism cracking. Colonel's face remained rigid, but a muscle twitched at his jaw. "Prepare for 800 meters, Sergeant Miller announced. Emma adjusted her scope. This was her father's realm, the range where physics bent into art, where calculations meant survival. Bullet drop, wind drift, air density, Earth's rotation. She worked the math in her head as easily as breathing, her father's voice echoing like a ghost. It's not about the target. It's about the space between you and it. The light flashed again. The first 800-meter target appeared, wavering in the mirage of heat. Emma fired, hit. Second, third, fourth. Her hands moved with the discipline of ritual, chambering each round, adjusting for each gust, each shift. The final target rose, barely visible at the edge of the facility. Emma's breath slowed. Her heartbeat quieted. She squeezed. The shot landed true. 10 shots, 10 hits. A silence fell over the facility, deeper than disbelief. Even the operators, men who lived by precision, stared as though witnessing something impossible. Sergeant Miller lowered his scope. 10 for 10, all center mass. Master Sergeant Wright, Delta's record holder, stepped forward, his face unreadable. He looked through the spotting scope himself. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a soldier who had nothing to prove. Confirmed, grouping than mine. He turned to Emma, his voice steady with professional respect. That's some of the finest shooting I've ever seen. Applause broke out, not raucous, not mocking, but genuine. Hardened warriors, some skeptical only moments ago, now nodding with recognition. Respect given where it was due. But's face hardened. He stepped closer, towering over Emma, voice low and dangerous. Impressive, almost too impressive. One might wonder how a 12-year-old achieved such results. It wasn't a compliment, it was a warning. Martinez stepped forward, his voice sharp. She achieved it because her father trained her, because talent runs deeper than your doubts, Bill. Ignored him, his eyes never left Emma. Stationary targets, he said coldly. They don't move, they don't shoot back. Real combat is chaos. If you truly want to prove yourself, miss, there's one more test. Emma lifted her eyes from the rifle, calm, steady. What test? Gestured to the far end of the facility, a section bristling with mechanical targets and hidden sensors. Advanced combat simulation, 20 targets, variable ranges, 3 seconds exposure time, some move, some don't. Your father holds the record, 15 out of 20. The challenge hung in the air. It was a trap, everyone saw it. Fail and she'd be exposed, refuse and she'd be branded a coward. Martinez leaned close, voice low. You don't have to do this. Passing the qualification was enough. You've already proven your point. Emma's voice was almost a whisper. Dad didn't raise me to stop halfway. She stood, her small shoulders squared. I accept. The facility crew reset the range. Operators whispered, some uneasy now. Even Wright frowned, arms crossed, disapproval flickering across his face as he spoke quietly too. Whatever was said didn't matter. Smile remained thin, cold, unshaken. Sergeant Miller explained the rules, his voice tight. 20 targets, random presentation, standard scoring, shooter ready. Emma settled behind the rifle. The quirks of the sabotaged weapon no longer mattered. She had mapped them, mastered them. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The first target snapped into view, moving laterally at 400 meters. Emma tracked, led, fired. A hit. Another target flashed at 500, exposed for barely a second. She fired, hit. The rhythm began, appearances random, distances shifting, exposure brief. Her breathing became metronomic. Her trigger finger flowed like water. Targets rose and fell, but each time her scope found them, each time her bullet met them. 10 targets, 12, 15. Behind her, silence reigned. Operators leaned forward, watching with wide eyes, the disbelief melting into awe. When the 20th target dropped, the facility lights brightened and the scoreboard lit with numbers. 19 hits. Gasps, murmurs, then applause, louder this time, genuine and unrestrained. She had not only broken the record, she had shattered it. His face was a mask, controlled, cold, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Impressive, he said quietly, almost unbelievable. Emma stood, her chest rising and falling, exhaustion creeping in only now. She looked directly at him, her voice calm, almost gentle. My father once told me the best shot isn't about skill, it's about why you take it. That's what you'll never understand, Colonel. For a heartbeat, the Colonel's composure cracked, just a flicker, then his mask returned. But the men around them had seen it. And in their silence, in their shifting gazes, Emma knew the battle was far from over. That night the video surfaced. Someone had recorded it, concealed phone, shaky footage, but clear enough. 12-year-old Emma, 19 out of 20 in the advanced combat simulation. Within hours it went viral, millions watched, headlines exploded. Child sniper prodigy breaks special forces record. And behind every headline, behind every share, a question grew louder. Who was her father really? And what had happened to him in Syria? The storm had begun. And sitting in his office, knew the walls were closing in. Why was the Pentagon suddenly so quiet about a 12-year-old girl? In a world where every headline lasted hours before being replaced, Emma's record-shattering performance refused to fade. The video of her 19 out of 20 shots, calm, precise, impossible, spread across platforms, news outlets, military forums. Veterans who hadn't set foot on a base in years shared it, their comments filled with awe and disbelief. Parents watched with unease. Children watched with wonder. And everywhere one question lingered: who was her father? The Army tried silence first. No statements, no denials, just a void where answers should be. But silence only fuels curiosity. Within days, journalists dug into the past. They found his name, Lieutenant James, Medal of Honor, Syria. And then they found his death. Killed in action, circumstances unclear, the official report vague, too vague. Emma's face filled TV screens, her small frame standing behind rifles built for men twice her size. Anchors leaned forward, voices hushed, as if speaking of her required reverence. The daughter of a hero, breaking records her father once said. But not everyone was celebrating. Behind closed doors, in windowless rooms where careers lived or died, men in uniform sat around polished tables. Screens replayed the video. They saw not a child's triumph but a problem, a breach, a risk. Because her father's name was attached. Because questions about his death meant questions about their decisions. And no one wanted those questions answered. At Fort, Emma walked through the mess hall with her tray held steady. Conversations paused when she passed. Some soldiers nodded respectfully. Others avoided her eyes. A few whispered, watching her with something like envy. Martinez sat with her, his weathered face unreadable as he sipped coffee gone cold. "You know what you've done, don't you?" he asked quietly. Emma poked at her food, not meeting his gaze. "I broke his record." "You did more than that," Martinez said. "You've put in a corner, and a cornered man is dangerous." Emma's fork stilled, her eyes lifted steady. "He's been dangerous a long time." Martinez leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Word is, Command wants to pull you out, send you home, quietly. They think this will blow over if you disappear." Emma shook her head. "I'm not leaving, not until his name is cleared." Her voice carried no hesitation, no fear, just quiet conviction. Martinez studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we need to change the game." 2 days later in the colonel's office, Emma stood small but unyielding. Sat behind his desk, papers spread before him, his expression carved from stone. "You've caused enough chaos, miss," he said flatly. "This circus ends now. You'll return to your school, to your life. This is not your world." Emma placed her father's journal on his desk, the leather cover worn, edges frayed. Her voice was steady. "This was his world, and you erased him from it. I'm not leaving until everyone knows the truth." His eyes narrowed. "What truth? That your father disobeyed orders, that he went rogue in Syria, that men died because of his recklessness." Her chest tightened, but she didn't look away. "That's not what happened. He saved lives, and you know it." The colonel leaned forward, his voice sharp, venomous. "Careful, girl. You're walking into waters deeper than you can swim." But Emma didn't flinch. "Then let's make it simple. A challenge. I'll shoot again, officially, against anyone you choose. If I win, you release the full report on my father's death, unedited. If I lose, I'll leave quietly." Blinked, caught off guard for the first time. The audacity of it, the impossibility. He almost laughed, but something in her eyes stopped him. They weren't the eyes of a child. They were James' eyes. Word spread within hours. Soldiers called it the challenge. A head-to-head test, one girl against the best shooters the military could offer. Some mocked it, dismissing it as a stunt. Others whispered with anticipation, sensing history in the making. The date was set, a week from now, at the outdoor long-range complex. Conditions uncontrolled, targets beyond a kilometer. Hand-picked the competitors, Delta snipers, SEALs with years of deployments. Even Wright, the record holder she had already surpassed, was pushed to accept, wanted overwhelming odds. The Army's Public Affairs Office tried to bury it, but the story leaked anyway. Journalists gathered outside the gates. Cameras waited. The public demanded to see if the legend was true. Emma trained quietly away from the noise. Martinez drilled her at dawn, running her through unpredictable conditions, crosswinds, moving targets, shifting terrain. She stumbled. She failed. She got back up. And in the quiet moments, she read her father's words. "The shot is never about glory. It's about the man beside you, the lives in your care. When the trigger breaks, you must already know why." Sometimes she cried when she read them. Sometimes she smiled. Always she felt him near. The night before the challenge, Martinez found her sitting alone on the bleachers, the stars spread above them. "You ready?" he asked. Emma hugged the journal to her chest. "I'm scared." The admission was small, fragile, but honest. Martinez sat beside her, nodding slowly. "Good. Fear keeps you alive. Your father was always scared before a mission. The difference is he never let it stop him." Emma's voice wavered. "What if I fail?" Martinez placed a hand on her shoulder firm. "Failing is missing a shot, but you've already won." You reminded them of who he was. That matters more than any score tomorrow. Emma leaned against him, her eyes closing for a moment. In that quiet, she let herself be a child again, just for a breath. The morning came sharp and cold. Soldiers lined the range, their breath misting in the air. Journalists pressed against the fences, cameras raised. Veterans filled the bleachers, some holding small flags, some holding silence. At the far end, targets gleamed in the sun. Steel plates, tiny at the naked eye, set from 800 meters to 1,200. Stood near the firing line, arms crossed, his expression carved in ice. Behind him, his hand-picked snipers prepared their rifles, confident, calm. And then Emma stepped forward, small, fragile in appearance, but her presence drew every eye, every breath. She carried her father's rifle, cleaned, oiled, balanced perfectly, not the sabotaged weapon from before. This one she had chosen herself from the armory under Martinez's watch. She knelt at the line, laying out her gear with careful precision. Her hands shook for only a moment, then steadied. Martinez stood behind her, silent, just as he had once stood behind James. The announcer's voice carried across the field. Competitors will engage targets in sequence, starting at 800 meters. Highest hit count in 30 rounds determines the winner. The countdown began. Emma closed her eyes. Her father's voice whispered in memory. "The perfect shot lives between your heartbeats." The horn sounded. Her eyes snapped open. The challenge had begun. Why did the world feel so still when the first shot rang out? The crack of a rifle echoed across the long-range complex, a sharp sound swallowed by the wind. A SEAL sniper had fired first, his round slamming into steel at 800 meters. Applause rippled through the watching crowd. Cameras clicked. Commentators murmured. Emma waited. She didn't rush, she didn't compete on their rhythm. She had learned that from her father. The battlefield has its own pace. Don't fight it, find it, ride it. Her cheek pressed into the stock. The rifle settled into her shoulder. The target shimmered in the morning haze, heat waves bending it into a mirage. She slowed her breathing. Her heartbeats spaced wider like stepping stones across a river. She fired. The steel rang with a sound as clear as a bell. A murmur swept the crowd. A child, matching the opening shot of an operator who had seen years of war. The competition rolled forward. Each sniper fired in sequence, targets stretching farther downrange. At 900 meters, one SEAL missed, wind drift carrying his round wide. At 1,000, even Wright clipped the edge of a plate, barely holding his score. And Emma. Shot after shot, she adjusted. Calculations flickered through her mind. Wind speed, bullet drop, humidity. She didn't see numbers. She saw her father's hand guiding hers, the way he had once drawn diagrams in the dirt, explaining the invisible forces between rifle and target. The crack of her shots blended into a rhythm, each one followed by the sweet, metallic chime of impact. The soldiers watching shifted uneasily. Some crossed their arms, unwilling to admit what they were seeing. Others leaned forward, breath held. By the halfway mark, Emma was tied for the lead. At 1,100 meters, the wind rose suddenly, swirling, unpredictable. Had ordered the range conditions randomized, hopping chaos would trip her. The operators adjusted, compensating with years of experience. Emma closed her eyes. "The wind is a language," her father had once told her. "Listen long enough and you'll hear its words." She inhaled, felt it on her skin. The way it pushed, pulled, hesitated. When she opened her eyes, she shifted her aim, not at the target but at the invisible space where the bullet would travel. She fired. The steel plate rang. Gasps erupted. Even Wright's brows rose, respect flickering across his face. His jaw tightened. At 1,200 meters, the final test loomed. 30 rounds fired. Only 2 competitors remained perfect. Wright, Delta's champion sniper, and Emma, 12 years old, carrying her father's ghost. The crowd buzzed with electricity. Soldiers leaned forward. Journalists whispered into microphones. Viewers across the world watched on, the number climbing into millions. The announcer called the final target, 1,200 meters. Exposure time, 5 seconds. Wright went first. He adjusted calmly, years of training behind his every motion. His rifle barked. The plate rocked, hit. The crowd cheered. Emma stepped forward. She felt the weight of every eye, every breath, pressing against her small frame. Her hands trembled as she loaded the round. She tried to still them, but the tremor wouldn't vanish. Fear. Doubt. She almost broke. And then she remembered Martinez's words. Even your father was afraid. She let the fear exist. She didn't fight it, she breathed through it. Her father's voice returned in memory, steady, patient. It's not about hitting the steel, Emma. It's about why you fire. Her eyes steadied, her heartbeat slowed. The target flashed into view. She fired. The steel sang. The crowd erupted, soldiers cheered, veterans rose to their feet, journalists shouted into cameras. 19 hits out of 20, Wright 18. Emma, 12 years old, stood alone at the top. Reporters swarmed, cameras pressed forward, questions rained down. How long have you been shooting? Who trained you? What does this mean for the Army? Emma answered none of them. She only lifted her father's journal high, the worn leather catching the sun. Her voice was calm, steady. This was his record, now it's ours. The crowd quieted, hushed by the weight of her words. But not everyone was silent. Colonel stepped forward, his expression carved in steel, his voice raised enough to carry. This spectacle proves nothing. Records are entertainment, not war, and war is where your father failed. The cheers died instantly. A ripple of unease spread. Emma lowered the journal slowly. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. He didn't fail, you did. The silence cut deeper than any shout. Soldiers exchanged looks. Martinez stood taller. Wright's jaw tightened. His face darkened, but he didn't answer. Not here, not with the cameras rolling. That night the footage spread faster than wildfire. The challenge dominated headlines. Clips of Emma's final shot looped endlessly. Hashtags trended. Commentators debated. Some called her a prodigy. Others called her a child soldier. But all agreed on one point. Her father's name was back in the light. And that made nervous. Because with attention came scrutiny. And scrutiny meant someone would eventually read the full report. 2 nights later, Emma sat alone in her barracks room, the journal open in her lap. She flipped to the page she had avoided since the beginning. Syria, the final entry. Her father's handwriting was hurried, jagged, ink blotched by dust or blood. Under heavy fire, called for support, delaying, men pinned, won't last. If anyone finds this, tell Emma I love her. Tell her the truth matters, even if I'm gone. Tears blurred the words. Her throat ached. For the first time since this began, she wanted to throw the journal away, to stop carrying its weight. But she couldn't. Because this was more than her father's story. It was her mission now. She wiped her eyes, closed the journal, whispered into the silence. I'll finish it, Dad. Across the base in his office poured whiskey into a glass, his hands unsteady. The walls seemed to close in around him. He saw her face in every headline. He heard her voice in every broadcast. He read her father's name in every article, and he knew the truth was slipping from his control. So he picked up the phone. His voice was low, urgent. "Activate the file now. If she pushes further, we bury it." A pause, a voice on the other end. An answer, cold and final. "Then we bury her too." Why did the base suddenly feel colder, even in daylight? Emma noticed it the morning after the challenge. Soldiers who had nodded at her before now avoided her eyes. Conversations ended when she entered a room. Where there had once been cautious respect, now there was distance, isolation. Something had shifted. She sat at her usual table in the mess hall, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. Martinez sat across from her, his weathered face unreadable. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded. "They're treating me different." Martinez leaned closer, lowering his voice. "That's because made a move. Word is he pulled strings last night. Got access to files even I haven't seen. He's setting something up." Emma frowned, her small hands tightening on the fork. "What kind of files?" Martinez's eyes darkened. "The kind that ruin people, the kind that erase truth. They'll rewrite your father's death, make him look reckless, unstable, and if you push too hard, they'll say the same about you." Her chest tightened, the eggs on her plate blurred. "But I was there, I saw what he wrote." "Doesn't matter," Martinez said. "In this world, perception is louder than fact." Emma's voice broke into a whisper. "So what do I do?" Martinez held her gaze, his voice firm. "You fight smarter, not just with rifles, with truth." That afternoon, Emma returned to her barracks to find the door ajar. Her stomach clenched. She pushed it open slowly. The room looked untouched, bed made, books stacked neatly. But when she opened her footlocker, the journal was gone. Her knees went weak, panic surged. "Dad's journal," she whispered. Martinez arrived minutes later, his eyes scanning the room like a battlefield. He crouched by the locker, fingers tracing the metal. No signs of a break-in. They used a key. Emma's heart pounded. Martinez stood, his jaw tight. Or someone working for him. Either way, they have it now. Emma felt the weight of loss crash into her chest. The journal wasn't just paper. It was her father's voice, his truth. Without it, she was just a girl with a story no one would believe. She sat on the bed, her face in her hands. "It's over." But Martinez knelt in front of her, his eyes steady. "Listen to me. Jim was my brother in arms. He didn't give up in Syria, and neither will you. They may have the journal, but they don't know what's in here." He tapped her temple lightly. Emma blinked through tears. "I memorized parts of it. I read them so many times." "Good," Martinez said. "That's enough to keep fighting." 2 days later, made his move. A press release circulated quietly, leaked just enough to find its way into newsrooms. It painted James as unstable, disobedient, even dangerous. It hinted that his death in Syria had been the result of his own reckless decisions. The words were clinical, but the message was clear. James had not been a hero. Emma read it on a news site, her hands trembling so hard she almost dropped the tablet. Her father's name, her father's honor twisted into lies. Her throat burned. She wanted to scream, to throw the device against the wall, but instead she whispered into the quiet barracks. "He warned me this could happen." She opened a notebook she had started since losing the journal. Her own handwriting filled the pages, quotes, passages, fragments she remembered from her father's words. She flipped to the last page, where she had his final entry word for word. "Delaying won't last. Tell Emma the truth matters." She pressed her hand against the page, steadying her breath. "They won't bury you, Dad, not again." That night Martinez came to her room with a small folder. His voice was low, cautious. "I pulled a favor," he said. "Old friend at intelligence owed me. He sent this." Inside were photocopies of classified transmissions, dated 3 years ago. Emma's eyes widened, her father's call sign, the time stamps, the repeated requests for air support, each one unanswered. At the bottom, a note in handwriting Martinez recognized immediately. Delay until confirmation. Emma's hands shook as she held the papers, the proof she needed, the proof would bury her for. They'll come for this, Martinez warned. And for you, you need to be careful. Emma looked up at him, her face pale but her eyes steady. Then we don't hide, we show it, all of it, public, so everyone knows before they can destroy it. Martinez hesitated. That's dangerous, Emma. Once it's out there, you can't take it back and won't stop coming. Her voice was quiet, certain, then let him come. The following morning, Emma slipped the folder into her backpack and walked toward the base library, where she knew the computers weren't monitored as tightly. Her small frame blended with the soldiers moving between buildings, but her heart pounded with every step. Halfway there, a black SUV slowed beside her. The window rolled down. Sat inside, his face calm, his eyes cold. "Get in," he said. Emma froze. Martinez appeared behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his voice sharp. "Keep walking, kid." His gaze shifted to him. The two men stared across the years, once comrades, now enemies. "You're playing a dangerous game," Frank said evenly. Martinez didn't blink. "Better than the coward's game you've been playing." His jaw tightened. "She's a child, she doesn't belong here." Emma found her voice, trembling but clear. "Neither did you, the day you left my father to die." The silence cut sharper than a blade. His eyes flicked with something, anger, fear, maybe guilt, but his mask returned quickly. He nodded once to his driver. The SUV rolled away. Martinez exhaled slowly. "He's watching every move. You need to be ready." Emma gripped the backpack straps. Her voice was steady. "So am I." That night, Emma dreamed of her father. She saw him in the desert, crouched behind his rifle, sweat running down his face. He turned, smiled at her, and said the words she had memorized 100 times. "One shot, one life." When she woke, her cheeks were wet with tears, but her chest burned with fire. She whispered into the dark barracks, her voice breaking but certain. "I'll finish it for you, Dad. I'll tell the truth, no matter what it costs." Across the base, stood in his office, staring at a locked drawer in his desk. Inside lay the stolen journal, its pages damning, its words undeniable. He poured another glass of whiskey, but his hand shook as he lifted it. Because deep down, he knew the truth was slipping from his control. And he knew Emma would not stop. So he picked up the phone again, his voice colder than before. "Clean this up, I don't care how. Do it before she speaks." A pause, a voice on the line. And final words, chilling in their certainty. "She can't survive this." Why did the air on base feel like a trap waiting to spring? Emma sensed it before Martinez even spoke. Soldiers moved differently now, patrols doubled, ID checks sharper, conversations clipped. She walked to the training field and felt eyes following her. Not admiration this time. Surveillance. Martinez joined her at the bleachers, his jaw tight. "They're closing in. Musk called in favors. I heard whispers, counterintelligence is sniffing around. They'll brand you as unstable, maybe even a threat." Emma hugged her backpack close. The folder with her father's transmissions rested inside, heavier than steel. "Then I don't have much time." Martinez studied her, his voice low, measured. "What's your plan?" Emma stared across the empty field. "I take it public, not through the army, not through, straight to the people." Martinez frowned. "That's dangerous. Once it's out, you'll be a target, not just here, everywhere." Emma's voice cracked but didn't falter. "He already made me a target." That evening, Emma slipped into the library. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, rows of books standing like silent witnesses. She found an unused corner computer, her small hands steady as she opened her backpack. The folder lay before her. Transmissions, time stamps, the damning note in hand, delay until confirmation. Her father's death sentence in 7 words. She inserted a flash drive, scanning the pages into digital form. Each beep of the scanner echoed like gunfire in her chest. Her palms sweated. Her throat was dry, but her eyes never wavered. When she finished, she logged into a secure veterans forum Martinez had shown her weeks before, a place where soldiers spoke freely, off the record. She uploaded the files, attaching only 4 words. The truth about Syria. Her finger hovered over the mouse. Fear surged. What if no one believed? What if discredited everything? But then she remembered her father's final entry. The truth matters, even if I'm gone. She clicked. Upload complete. The ripple began quietly. A handful of veterans noticed. They debated, cautious, skeptical. But then one of them recognized the call sign he had served under. He vouched. Another dug deeper, cross-referencing unit logs. By midnight, the forum was aflame. By dawn, screenshots had leaked onto social media. Within hours, journalists were calling it explosive. The files. Proof that air support had been deliberately delayed. Proof that had signed the order. The story spread like wildfire. Networks scrambled. Analysts debated. Veterans called in live, some weeping as they spoke of James, the man who had saved their lives. And at the center of it all was Emma, the girl who refused to let her father be erased. Watched the storm unfold from his office. The journal lay on his desk, pages marked with sticky notes, his glass of whiskey untouched beside it. Every headline cut deeper. Every broadcast carried Emma's face. His phone rang, a voice sharp and cold. This is spiraling out of control, contain it. His jaw clenched. Containment isn't enough, not anymore, we need to end it. The voice hesitated. You're talking about a child. His reply was ice. I'm talking about survival. Meanwhile, Emma walked the base with Martinez at her side. Soldiers she passed no longer avoided her. Some saluted. Some offered quiet nods of respect. The tide was shifting. But with respect came danger. That night, Martinez caught movement outside her barracks. 2 men in plain clothes lingering by the door. Not MPs, not regular soldiers, eyes sharp, hands heavy near their belts. He guided Emma away through the back, his voice low and urgent. They're not here to talk, you need to move. Emma's chest tightened. Where? Martinez thought quickly. Somewhere doesn't control, somewhere public. The range, Emma whispered. Martinez frowned. You want to go back there? Emma nodded. It's where this started, and it's where it ends. If wants to silence me, he'll have to do it in front of everyone. The next morning, the long-range complex was already alive with whispers. Word had spread that Emma would return. Soldiers filled the bleachers. Veterans came from off-base, some carrying flags, some carrying silence. Even a handful of reporters waited, cameras ready. Emma walked to the firing line, her father's rifle slung across her back. Martinez trailed beside her, every step deliberate. Was already there, his uniform sharp, his expression cold. He addressed the crowd, his voice carrying authority like a weapon. This circus has gone far enough. Lieutenant was a brave man, but his daughter has been manipulated. These so-called files are forgeries, spread by those who wish to undermine the army. Today, we put this to rest. Emma stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the rifle. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. My father wrote everything down. He knew this day might come. And you, she looked directly at, you knew delaying support would kill him. You made that choice, and you've been hiding it ever since. Gasps rippled. Soldiers shifted uneasy. His mask cracked, just for a heartbeat, enough for Martinez to see. Emma raised the rifle, laying it on the stand. If you want to end this, Colonel, then shoot beside me. Show them who you are, or let the truth speak louder than your lies. The challenge hung in the air. Hesitated, the crowd watched. soldiers whispered. Finally, he stepped forward. His hands were steady as he took a rifle from the rack, but his eyes betrayed something else: fear. The range lit up with gunfire. Emma's shots rang true, steady, each one finding steel. Matched her at first, his skill undeniable, his years of service honed into instinct. But as the wind shifted, as the distance stretched, cracks appeared. His shots drifted, his breathing faltered. Emma stayed calm. Her father's words guided her. Each shot carried not just skill but purpose. By the end, the scoreboard told the story. Emma 18. 13. The silence afterward was heavy, unbroken. Emma lowered her rifle. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "You can't erase him anymore." The crowd erupted, not in cheers but in applause. Slow, steady, growing louder. Soldiers rose to their feet. Veterans saluted. Stood frozen, his face pale, his hands clenched. Because in that moment, he knew it wasn't just about records anymore. It was about the truth. And the truth was no longer his to control. That night, Emma sat at her father's grave again. The air was cool, the stars sharp above. She placed the flash drive at the base of the stone, beside the shell casing from her first shot. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "They know now, they'll remember." Her voice broke, tears slipped down her cheeks. "But I'm scared too, he's not finished, I can feel it." The silence around her seemed to listen, to hold her words. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "I'll stand, just like you did." She rose, wiping her face, her small figure silhouetted against the night. But behind her, unseen in the shadows, a figure watched. Its voice, cold and final, carried on the wind. "If she won't break in front of them, then she'll break in the dark." Why was the night so quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath? Emma felt it before she saw it. The unease, the weight pressing on her chest as she walked back to the barracks. Martinez had left her at the gate, promising to return after checking on something. She told him she'd be fine, but as she turned the corner, the silence felt wrong. The shadows were thicker than usual. And then they moved. Two figures stepped from the dark, plain clothes, hands heavy at their sides. Behind them, the glint of headlights as a black SUV rolled into view. Emerged. His face was pale in the moonlight, his jaw tight, his eyes colder than she had ever seen. He walked toward her with the certainty of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You should left when you had the chance," he said softly. Emma's hands tightened on her backpack straps. Her voice was small but steady. "You're afraid, not of me, of him, of the truth." His lips twitched, a humorless smile. "Truth is written by survivors, and you won't be one." The men moved closer. Emma's heart pounded. Fear surged, raw and primal. She wanted to run, to scream. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. "The perfect shot lives between your heartbeats." This wasn't a rifle range. This wasn't a competition. This was survival. She reached into her bag, not for a weapon but for the flash drive. She held it up, small fingers trembling, the metallic glint catching the moonlight. "You can take me," she said, voice cracking. "But this is already out there. Everyone has seen it. You can't stop it now." Froze, his men glanced at each other. Emma's breath caught. For the first time she saw it clearly, the fear in his eyes, not of her but of the world closing in. Martinez's voice cut through the night. "Stand down, Bill." He stepped from the shadows, rifle raised, stance solid. Soldiers followed behind him, men who had served with, veterans who had heard the files, who had chosen to stand with Emma. Their weapons gleamed under the SUV's lights. Turned slowly, his composure cracking. "Frank, don't do this. You know what's at stake." Martinez's voice was iron. "What's at stake is honor, something you forgot a long time ago." The silence stretched. His men hesitated, unsure. And then's fury broke. He lunged for Emma, his hand outstretched, but Martinez's voice thundered. "Enough." The soldiers moved as one, surrounding, forcing him back. The SUV lights cut out. The night swallowed the scene. Emma stood frozen, her chest heaving, her hands clutching the flash drive like a weapon. His face twisted with something between rage and despair. "You'll regret this," he spat, "all of you." But his words carried no power anymore. Because for the first time, he stood alone. In the days that followed, the army couldn't stay silent. Investigations opened. Journalists dug deeper. The transmissions were, Snoke confirmed. His career collapsed under the weight of the truth he had tried to bury. For Emma, life didn't suddenly become easier. She still walked through whispers, still felt the ache of loss every time she opened her eyes. But she also carried something else now. Respect. At the memorial hall, veterans gathered, some in uniforms that no longer fit, some in civilian clothes lined with medals. They came not for the army, but for the man who had saved them, for the girl who refused to let him be forgotten. Emma stood at the podium, small and nervous, her father's beret clutched in her hands. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied with each word. "My father taught me that a rifle is not for killing, it's for protecting. He taught me that the shot is never about glory, it's about the lives beside you. He died believing those lives mattered more than orders, and now the world knows it too." The hall was silent, then slowly the applause began. Not thunderous, not wild, but steady, respectful, the kind of applause given not to heroes but to truth. That evening, Emma returned to Arlington Cemetery. The air was cool, the grass damp with dew. She knelt before her father's grave, placing the beret gently on the stone. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "They know who you were, they'll remember." Her voice broke, tears blurred her vision. "I thought I was too small, too young, that no one would listen, but I kept going because you told me the truth mattered, even if it hurts, even if it costs everything." She pressed her palm to the stone, her small figure dwarfed by the rows of white markers stretching into the night. "I miss you every day, but I'll carry this for both of us now." The silence around her held her words like a promise. She rose, her silhouette outlined by the glow of the cemetery lights. For the first time, she didn't feel like a child standing in a world too big for her. She felt like what her father had raised her to be. A protector, a truth-teller. Across the city, sat in a dim cell, his uniform stripped of insignia, his career reduced to ash. He stared at the concrete wall, his mind replaying Emma's final words on the range. "You can't erase him anymore." And he knew she was right. Weeks later, at a quiet range on the outskirts of town, Emma lay behind her rifle again. The target stretched across the field, steel plates catching the sun. Martinez stood behind her, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his face. "You ready?" he asked. Emma nodded, her cheek pressed against the stock, her breathing steadied, her heart slowed. She fired. Steel rang. Not for records, not for revenge, but for memory. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't argue, it doesn't shout. Sometimes it simply acts. And in the silence that follows, the truth rings louder than any gunfire.